It's very satisfying to watch it become a
right. I love the visual timer. Neurodivergent.
Okay, so I have been tasked with picking from my own list.
Yep, you have 1 to 8.
But 1 to 8, I do remember
6.
what number 1 is, so I can't do number 1. I can't do
number
6.
Number 1 and 6 are out.
Let's go with 3.
Okay, what's number 3?
Oh, okay, yeah, this is a good one. What do you do if you suspect you might be autistic?
Ooh.
So this is going to be the episode for all the people who are that like, I think I might be autistic, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'm gonna bat it over to you.
With a question, do you have a question? I mean, it is my question, but anything you want to direct me with?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious about like, what was your experience like? What were the inklings that were coming up for you, and what did you do with that? Just, put you on the spot, be vulnerable.
Not an inkling, because my therapist and my art therapist, because I want to make sure highlight the art therapists out there. My art therapist suggested I might be autistic. So it wasn't like something I came to on my own. And when she suggested it, I was like, what? Because I had the old conceptualizations of autism in my mind, meaning just solely the external stereotypical behaviors. And I was like, I don't match those. That's BS. And so then she suggested I read Divergent Mind by Nemberg, I believe. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Names aren't my strong suit. So I read that book, and that book has many different types of neurodiversity, but it has a whole section on autism. And it was the first time I'd read a book that contained the internal experience of autism. Like what it's like, kind of like that, what we talk about with the background programming running in autism, where you're like aware of how you're behaving and you're analyzing things. It was just like kind of exploring the emotions and thoughts of what it's like to be autistic. And that's when I was like, ooh, that sounds similar to me. But it still was so broad, it wasn't enough. And so then that's when I went down like a deep, deep, deep rabbit hole research of like, can someone please clearly explain what is autism to me? And I still, quite frankly, don't have a book or a resource that does that. Do you know of one that exists that you're like, yes, read this?
I don't know yet. Like, so I don't want to say like there isn't one.
Well, like, yeah, but one you're aware of.
Part of what people are trying to create, like, and just side note, like, so you mean to say you did the autistic thing of going down a deep dive and studying?
Yeah, like yet another sign that you're probably autistic. Yeah.
Same. Took all the quizzes on the internet.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry. I am going to interrupt you there, because you just said all the quizzes on the internet. That's actually a really good resource to mention here of like, okay, if you think you might be autistic, that is something you can do. There's really good.
Yeah. We'll post the link. embrace-autism.com is by autistic people for autistic people, with a bunch of free, I say quizzes, but they're actually more robust, like self-evaluation questionnaires.
So thank you for saying that. They're not just like pop quizzes. They're self-assessments to really help you understand and see differently.
It's not like BuzzFeed, like what kind of pizza crust you are.
Yeah, not like that, but yeah. So we can put those in the show notes. And I'm sorry I interrupted. I just wanted to throw that in there.
It's good. That's all important. But yeah, I think like, so one of the things that I loved, this is a weird statement, but one of the things I loved as a complex trauma therapist was learning about like the neurobiology of trauma and how we heal that. So when I was working with clients, I would be able to like educate them like, this is how your brain is, like this is how the traumatized brain is. This is what we're doing with your brain to get it to like a not activated PTSD traumatized state. Like these are the actual neurobiological things we're doing to create new neural pathways to, heal different things. And I would love to have content like what is mechanically different about my autistic ADHD brain.
Yeah.
And I have seen content that is ADHD, that is autistic, but I'm also curious, like, okay, is my autistic ADHD brain just like those two parts put together? Or is an autistic ADHD brain this third or this other thing that is entirely different? Like I want to get in under the hood and see like what is it that's going on? What is it that makes like our sensory so much more keen? And what is it that makes our thinking run so much faster?
And so like in my extensive research, I have not found like one resource that does that. I think similar to other autistics, it's more like we're gathering like, oh, a little bit from here and a little bit from there and a little bit from there and a little bit from there. And we're kind of like putting things together that make sense for us. And this is why like it's an exciting time to be autistic, because all of this is happening. And I'm sure in like 20 years, there will be these resources.
Right. Well, I think like you were saying at the beginning, part of the problem is that so many of the resources that are available currently or even accessible, because like sometimes white papers are behind paywalls, like it's studying things from the external observation perspective. And so I think as more autistics are coming into our identity, as we are claiming our place in like, oh, yeah, well, this is something I want to study. So I'm going to go ahead and study it. I'm going to create the content that, 10, 20 years from now, people are going to be reading. But yeah, like the other day, I saw someone post this, I don't know, it's like a neural pathway. And there was one like twiggy looking one. And it was like, this is a neurotypical. And one like really full branchy one that this is autistic. And I was like, what? But what does that mean? Like,
and like we can't
like
right
picture.
now we're just theorizing and we can't prove anything. And a lot of it is just like, as more and more autistics are speaking up and speaking for ourselves, we're noticing all these patterns amongst ourselves and we're naming them, but there's not necessarily the research behind them. So like for instance, well, actually, no, I'm not going to go there because I think we're getting a little too far off topic from like, look at me, I'm actually reining us in, miracle. But that like, I really do want this to be an episode of like, okay, I think I might be autistic, instead of like us trying to define autism. Like, what are other things people can be doing in this stage? Because you person watching, I'm assuming if you're in this stage, you're like, oh my God, I want more information. Like, that's the thing I see most autistics go, not most, every single one. I don't know
like,
a single
we
one
got
that
our
was like,
weekend PhD devouring the entire internet and all of TikTok on like what autistic content. I think for me, one of the things that I experienced that was like, ha ha ha, neurodivergent memes, totally relatable. And then it was like, oh, ha ha ha, ha ADHD specific memes, totally relatable. And I was like, oh, autistic specific memes, totally relatable. So I'm definitely one of those like birthed from the memes person who came into my identity because of that. And, like having been part of the mental health professional field, it's really interesting to be a person who has self-identified and has embraced that and has like fully support the validity of self-identification for others, but still like aware of what the mental health field thinks, or like some people in terms of like those who want to be gatekeepers of diagnosis and those who want
Yeah.
to, you know, have like the power of I am now declaring you autistic.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just interesting because there's these things that people say like, oh, I'm not, so TikTok, everybody thinks they're autistic now. And I think about it very similar to gender and sexuality. It's not like suddenly everybody's like queer and trans. No, it's that we now have access to language for things that we're experiencing. When I was a kid, we had literal Britannica encyclopedia to go look up stuff in. And
Yeah.
so now with the internet, if you look up something, there's this whole constellation of things that like might be related to this. And so that's where we get exposed to, oh, there's other language. What is that? What do those terms mean? What does that mean? And what is being portrayed in social media is absolutely like lived experience. And I love what so many people are talking about that I've been hearing recently, just in the last couple of weeks, is like it doesn't harm anyone for you to relate to something and begin building accommodations into your life. There is no gatekeeper on accommodation. If
Yeah.
whatever the diagnosis or identity is, if you see something that somebody's talking about, like, hey, I have this experience, this is something that makes it easier for me to do that. And you go home and you practice that and you're like, oh yeah, this is easier. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like you get to have that. Nobody gets to gatekeep that from you and be like, nope, you're not official, so you don't get to wear headphones in public.
So on that note, then, I think to distill that down into advice, it would be the way that you enjoy consuming content, whether that be in your case like TikTok, in my case Medium, because I read. I don't like videos, and as we do a video, but that really like consume content about autism in a way you enjoy. And then if you still have questions and things still seem unclear, that's when I would seek out, an autistic coach or an autistic therapist, like someone that is their role is to help you explore it more. Not everyone needs that. And in fact, I think most don't, but you could even go as far as to be like, no, I even want a diagnosis. Like that's for you to decide for yourself.
Right.
And, as autistics, we have the ability to ruminate and ruminate and ruminate. And if you're really like, am I autistic? Am I not? Am I autistic? Am I not? And it's causing you a lot of turmoil, then like go talk to a professional. That's okay. Like that's time. And like, again, it's your choice.
Yeah. And I think there's more and more, more and more people are being open about their identity. Like you, as I'm an autistic art therapist, right? Like I'm an autistic mindset coach. More people are being open about their identities so that people who want a provider with lived experience can find them. And that's
Right, which
huge.
is so important, because if you're like going to your current therapist who doesn't have lived experience or isn't educated on it, they're not going to be able to bring you the clarity. Like that art therapist who suggested I might be autistic, she actually didn't know that much about autism, knew just enough to be like, hey, I think. And that's why I didn't continue with her after that. I'm like forever grateful. I'm like, hey, thank you for taking me this far. But that book she recommended was about as far as she could take me. She couldn't provide more understanding or education. Or for me, I was at a point that I was like, well, what is autism and what is trauma in my life? And what is masking and who am I? And like teasing that out was very difficult for me, which is why I wanted an autistic therapist, but I couldn't find one in Arizona. Like,
Oh, wow.
I mean, I tried. And so that's why I went with an autistic coach from like the Netherlands, ironically. And so,
Well,
and I mean, and that was helpful, but like, again, like, really for me, it's just been a process of time and, just consuming stuff over time, meeting other autistic people over time. And then also for me, writing, like processing my own thoughts about it is what has really helped me to like solidify my autistic identity.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with those. I think connecting with others, whether it's through personal essays, of actually autistic people. I I do enjoy the videos of social media. And I think, there are some resources that like I would name more trustworthy than others. Like Neuroclastic is one of the resources that I direct people to in terms of like, here is sound information about autism. And we can share different resources.
Yeah. In fact, I have
down below.
I was going to add, I have a resource page on my website that even has like, if you want a diagnosis from an individual who is autistic, like a psychologist, like here's who to go to, and some other books and videos, things like that. It's not comprehensive, but it's a start.
Yeah. And I have, we'll list our resource pages on my resource page. There are at least 2 directories that I know of that are specifically neurodivergent therapists. So if you are looking for that, that is a resource. And yeah, I think so many of us our resource building is in process. we're brand new at this. I'm brand new at being autistic ADHD.
Oh no.
And also, well,
sorry, it was freezing a little. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So into what I was saying. But yeah, I think that's like we are so much of like what I hear you doing, Jackie, and what many others are, like we are creating the resources that we want to exist in the world. And so hopefully in 10 years, 20 years, there are folks who women, non-binary folks, Black women, indigenous women and people, like these are the folks that have gone unidentified because we don't fall into, I think, Becky, did you come up with this phrase like the white boy autism?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so those of us who don't fall into that very like narrow slice of what autism can look like, I hope for a future that there are resources for folks to be able to recognize like, oh, hey, that's me. I love the children's books that are coming out. I'm learning more and more about children's books. One of my favorite ones that I can't wait to get is by Tiffany Haddish, called A Day Without Words. It's about her and her son. And it's like beautiful imagery and everything. There's another one I just saw.
This is cool.
Forbes it's something about the forest. But yeah, just that there's increasing children's books that are inclusive of autistic and neurodivergent kids who don't look like white boy autism.
That's cool. I haven't even like looked at kids' books, probably because I've just been so focused on like understanding it in adults, but I think that would be interesting too, to see the illustrations and it'd be a cool perspective.
Yeah. So maybe one of our shows will be like sharing kids' books.
Sharing what?
Sharing children's books.
Oh, okay.
I love was like the main lit class I took in college was children's literature, and I loved it. And so I buy children's books for myself all the time. as
All
a
right.
full grown ass adult.
Why does mine all